It's finally here. The NFL draft is upon us for 2025, and I've got all the latest news, all the latest mock picks, and all the latest best bets on the Fantasy First Down. I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down. It's my final mock draft of the 2025 season. And as always, there have been heaps of changes in the final 48 hours or so. So I'm going to get into all of those, plus talk about my favorite bets and all my picks for my final mock draft. If you haven't already, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also ask any questions over Instagram at the Fantasy First Down, over Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O, or just pop them in the comments below. You can also check out any draft updates over on Instagram. Plus, you can check out my full run through of all my mock drafts over at football.razzball.com. But let's get into it for the final mock draft. And trying to keep it pretty brief here, just going with the simple graphics so we can go through it and talk about all the important stuff. And we know the top four or so is pretty much locked in now. Cam Ward will go number one to the Titans. Travis Hunter near definitely going to Cleveland. That's been locked in for a good week or so. Abdul Carter will therefore go to the Giants, and they have him top of their board anyway, so they're happy enough with that. Even though I personally disagree and think having a third edge rusher when you've already got Thibodeaux and Birds doesn't make a lot of sense. They're apparently happy with this idea. And Will Campbell looks like he's definitely going to go to the Patriots. I called that quite a while ago. And that does look like it's going to come to fruition. At this time, I'd also like to, as always, thank the guys that helped me with all of the inside information. Walt and Charlie Campbell from Walter Football, Tony Pauline, and a couple of other guys around as well. So I'll shout out any guys when I remember that I got the information from them. Also a reminder that if you are betting, please bet within your means. And number 5, well, that was an opportunity you could have bet on relatively recently, but Ashton Jeanty is now very clearly the favorite among most bookmakers. It does seem like it's near definitely going to be Jeanty. Did seem like Graham was going to be the favorite for a long time, but it seems like Jeanty has risen up boards and the Jaguars have decided they want the best player available. It's not quite a done deal, but it's pretty close. So it seems like it's going to be Jeanty at 5, and I think you'll see that in most hot mock drafts. Number 6 is a little bit more of a question mark, though. Kelvin Banks has certainly risen up, and there have been a lot of rumors suggesting he's going to be involved with a lot of guys, big names in particular, talking about him as the guy to go at 6. Makes sense why there's a lot of change here, because Jeanty was expected to be the pick at 6 and suddenly he's not available, so people are scrambling a little bit. The latest news I've heard is that it's going to be Membu at 6, and that's what I have been betting, and I recommend doing the same. There are very good odds on Membu going at 6, and it does seem it's going to be down to Banks or Membu, and Membu is far more likely, for me at least, and a lot of people that I trust, to be the guy, especially people who know people inside the Ravens room are saying it's probably going to be Membu. And of course, Membu was expected to go at 7, so that opens that up as well. And it does seem at 7 there are 3 viable options. Mason Graham, for me, is the one that makes the most sense. I think they line him up next to Quinnen Williams, and all of a sudden you've got a fantastic interior pass rush, allow your defense to cope a lot better, and kind of help your offense with less scoreboard pressure. But there are a couple of other options. If Membu's gone, which I think he probably will be, Kelvin Banks is still an option. Not as much for natural right tackle, but you can slide him to the right side and leave Olu Fashanu on the left. So that is a viable need for them, even though I think they would certainly prefer Membu of the 2 options. And there's also the possibility of Tyler Warren. Talked about this a few times. Warren is certainly growing as a possibility in my mind, and I haven't decided exactly whether this is the right choice going with Graham or Warren. I guess we'll only find out on the actual draft time, but it's going to be close between Graham and Warren. I do think Warren is a real chance. They do need another pass-catching option to help out Justin Fields or whoever they end up with quarterback at the start of the season. But I've gone with Graham because I do feel like he's the most likely option here. At 8, it has been pretty clear-cut for a long time that the Panthers love Jalon Walker. The only question was going to be whether he was going to be available. And it does seem like there's no other teams that are really looking at taking him. But it does seem like the Panthers absolutely love him, and he will be the pick here. The only possibility is that Mason Graham falls down. They decide they want him, but they did bring in a lot of defensive tackles in free agency. It was an area of weakness. I don't know if they need to change that now. It does seem like it's going to be Walker. They have been a team who have been very vocal about wanting to trade back. Whether that happens or not will really, I think, depend on whether Walker's available. I think if Walker's there, they take him. If not, I think they might trade back for picks, because if Walker's gone, then that means someone else is available that other teams are going to want to move up and get. In at 9, and this is one of the messiest picks of the draft. For a long time, it looked like it would be Shedeur Sanders, and I even mocked that there in my last mock. But it does seem like that's highly unlikely now. It seems they probably prefer Jackson Dart and will get him with their second round pick, if then. That opens up a whole heap of opportunities, and they're staying very tight-lipped, the Saints, on what they're going to do. I think Michael Williams is the one that makes sense. They did a lot of work on him. He certainly fits a need for them. They do definitely need some edge rush help, even though they have brought in some guys on the line. If Graham drops to here, I could see him going as well. Weirdly enough, the odds have Booker as the second favorite. I don't see that at all. I don't see how that's at all going to work. I feel like Warren makes sense. Tyler Warren, definitely going to be an upgrade from Juwan Johnson. I could potentially see them taking Tetero and McMillan, for example, at this pick. They definitely need wide receiver help. And I also think that it's possible that they go with Kelvin Banks and improve their O-line. But I think Micah Williams is by far the most likely to occur, even though I think that another pick's more likely than that again. Tyler Warren, if he makes it to 10, will probably be the pick for the Bears. They would probably prefer to go Genty, I think, and it's not out of the realms of possibility that they'll trade up to get him, but they'll need to find the right trade partner, and they'll probably need to overpay to get him. I also think it's very possible they go with Banks. I put quite a bit on Banks to go here, and you can get pretty good odds. Of course, now there's a question about whether he's going to fall, but assuming he does, I do think that Banks makes a lot of sense. They have really improved their O-line, but I still feel like they're one player short, and they need a little bit more youth on it and get a real actual tackle prospect. So I would go with Banks here if I was going to bet, but Warren, I think, is the most likely outcome to occur. And Banks sits there at 11 for me. Obviously, odds aren't available for specific players outside the top 10. All these odds, by the way, are for FanDuel, but just use whatever's available for you. Kelvin Banks, obviously going to San Fran would make a lot of sense. They need to improve that O-line, help out Brock Purdy, who realistically is more of a system quarterback, and he needs a strong system in place, and also stimulate the run game for their best player, Christian McCaffrey. This is going to be Banks or a D lineman. Don't know exactly which. Probably depends on whether Banks is even there. I feel like if someone like a Graham falls, then that could definitely be the pick. Same thing with Jalon Walker potentially. Help him out on the edge. Maybe even Michael Williams. But with all of them gone, Banks makes most sense. I feel like these guys I've got in the top 11 are probably going to be the top 11. It's just working out the order that's going to be the real question. It has seemed like the Cowboys are going to go with Tetero and McMillan for quite some time. There was talk for a while about Matthew Golden. That's still possible, but I do think McMillan is more of a need for them. It gives them that big-bodied option next to CD Lamb, gives an alternative in the red zone along with Jake Ferguson. I just feel like they need more receiver help in general, and the bookmakers certainly agree with that. Not impossible to go O-line. I've certainly seen the mocked O-line at times, and that is possible, but I feel wide receiver is a lock if the guy they like is available. Number 13, this is a really interesting one. I don't agree with this pick at all. I think Jahdae Barron should barely be in the first round. He's too small. He's more of a slot guy. He's certainly a speed guy, but you definitely need some size compared to some of these wide receivers that they've got on the outside in the NFL. I don't think he has that to be a reliable NFL outside receiver, so this is too early for him. For me, slot cornerbacks generally go a little bit lower than this. I know some of the slot cornerback contracts have been rising, and that means they'll generally rise up draft boards, but this pick doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I would personally go with Will Johnson, but he is falling down draft boards a lot. It didn't look great on his pro day. Definitely some injury issues there, and that is causing problems, and that's why Barron is looking like the most likely the first cornerback off the board. And you can actually get pretty good odds of that, just slightly, like around minus 110, things like that, if you look in the right place. So that's not a bad bet. And betting cornerback for the Dolphins isn't a bad idea either. It's just tough to know exactly what the Dolphins are going to do because they do have other options. Apparently, they really like Malaki Starks as well. That's a possibility. D-line is possible. MN Wari even possible as another safety. Really, any safety is possible, especially if they move back. But I do think cornerback Barron or Johnson could both be involved here as well. One thing I don't think makes a lot of sense in O-line, I have mocked them one in the past. And I think if Kelvin Banks is there, they'd probably go for one. But I think outside the top 3 O-linemen, that's an unlikely situation. And Banks isn't likely to be there at this point by the looks of it. So for that reason, you could probably make a bit of money by betting on cornerback, D-line, and also maybe a little bit on safety as well. But not my favorite bet in the draft, certainly, just because it is so hard to pick what the Dolphins are doing. We don't really have any really good tips on what's going to happen there. The Colts have been thought to be getting a tight end for a long time. For me, it was always going to be tight end or O-line, and it does seem, based on who's available, tight end's most likely. Tyler Warren, highly unlikely to be here now. I gave Colston Loveland to them quite a while back in the process, and I'm sticking with that. I do think it makes the most sense. Tight ends have been awful for a while. They can finally strengthen that position, give Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, whichever one happens to be their quarterback going into the season, an actual proper check down option. Also opens up a little bit of space for Jonathan Taylor in the receiving game as well. Number 15. This is contingent on Shamar Stewart actually making it down here. It's not out of the question. The Saints take him. They do like those athletic edge rushes. I think it would be too early for him. In fact, I think this is too early for him based on his lack of production. But I do think this is a real possibility. Having said that, I do disagree with the odds. I think there are some other possibilities in play here. I think they could possibly go Jahad Campbell, knowing that he can also play off the edge as well if things don't go right as an off-the-ball linebacker. Cornerback, also not totally out of the question depending on who falls. But for me, edge will probably be the option, assuming one of their favorite edge players falls. I think Walker's unlikely to. Micah Williams might, but probably not. So Shamar Stewart really has to be their guy. Not out of the question. They'll go for someone like a James Pierce or a Mike Green. Problem is they don't tend to go for guys with questionable characteristics, with character issues. Both of those guys have dings in that area, and that's why Stewart's a bit further down for me. Number 16, Walter Nolan. There has been a lot of talk, and got to credit Walt for this one, that Walter Nolan is loved by the Cardinals. He'll probably go there if he's available. But the 49ers also love him, apparently. So this sort of 11 to 16 range is probably where he's going to fall. I think that the 49ers probably go Banks over Nolan if Banks is available. I think he probably will be, which likely means that Nolan falls to 16. It's a little bit crazy because Nolan is a very questionable prospect. He has a lot of upside, but there's some questions about his character. There's questions about his personality. There's questions about his work ethic. That's a lot of questions for a guy you're taking in the the first half of the first round. Having said that, I have also mocked Nolan to the Cardinals plenty of times during this process. So it makes total sense to me that they would go D-line or edge. There are other possibilities here as well. I could even imagine them going somewhere like a Matthew Golden. I feel like this is the sort of range where we could see him go off, and it wouldn't surprise me if someone trades up with a team like the Cardinals or the Falcons to try to get a D lineman, or possibly get ahead of the other edge teams if they particularly like an edge or a defensive tackle. At 17, here's Mike Green. I feel like this is too early for him, but I couldn't work out a fit otherwise. I do feel like the Bengals probably go edge. So this makes a lot of sense. Emanwari's been talked about plenty here, and this is a possible landing spot for him, but I think it's starting to look a little bit on the early side. Walt has said to me that he does think there's a real possibility that this will be Josh Connolly. And if you agree with that, and I think there's a reason to, the odds on going O-line here is very, very, very good. So putting a small amount on that can really make you a big profit, given I think it's more of like a 30% chance of happening rather than a 10% chance of happening, as the odds suggest. So certainly one worth betting. The other possibility here as well is D lineman. Derek Harmon's available, for example. Walter Nolan, if he somehow gets past the Cardinals and the 49ers, or potentially even Kenneth Grant, though I do feel like they want someone who can offer a little bit more pressure. Gray Zabel in at 18. This is a very popular chalk pick here, and I've had him going here at times in the past. I've also had Tyler Booker going here. I feel like they're always likely to go interior O-line, maybe a right tackle, but probably not, because I think they're fine with Lucas. Wide receiver, I've given them Matthew Golden at times because this is his kind of range. And if a tight end falls, they could definitely go with that as well. But for me, I think it's going to be very hard for them to pass up on O-line. Also, don't be totally shocked if they go for a defender like a linebacker or a safety. I feel like Campbell's a possibility here. And I also feel like Emanwari's a possibility, though I think if someone that they like on the O-line, or if Golden is available, or if a tight end is available, all of them would go ahead of the defenders. At 19, Jahad Campbell. This is really a question of whether he even makes it here or not. I don't like the odds on linebacker here because realistically, you're waiting on one player. It's not out of the question that the Bucks really trade back a long way and try to get out of the first round and then go take a different linebacker down there like Schlesinger. But I think that Campbell is ideally the pick for them. There has been talk about him falling because of a shoulder injury. I think that's possible, but I feel like 15 to 19 is the kind of correct range that we'll see him go in. If it's not him, edge rusher, Ezu Ruaku's possibility here, but there's plenty of other edge guys that are possible. At 20, Marion Hampton has seemed to be the guy for Denver for a long time. It does seem like they want to go running back. It's just a question of which one. I have seen Henderson mocks them here, but they did a lot more work on Hampton, and it does seem like he's their preference. I think they would really love to get Ashton Genty, but there's no way they're going to get up to 5 without giving up an absolute king's ransom. I don't think it really makes sense for them to do that just for Genty. They might decide otherwise, though, and I don't think that is out of the question. At 21, a lot of people mocking Shedeur Sanders here. I think it makes sense that they might go Sanders here, but with Aaron Rodgers still a possibility, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. I'm inclined to listen to Walt when he suggests, when guys like Aaron Wilson are saying that the Steelers are going to do something, he generally is spot on with this sort of thing. And they seem to suggest that they don't like Sanders here. So I'm willing to go with that. That's not to say they won't get Sanders later on, but if you want to bet Sanders going anywhere, I'd probably bet him to the Steelers rather than QB at this pick, because I think this is probably more likely to be D-line. In fact, Jerry Dulac come out and just blatantly said, even though they do like Sanders, they would prefer to go D-line. So in this case, I'm going Derek Harmon. I think he's more of a fit for them, but if Nolan's somehow here, if they want to go up and get him, I think he's a possibility. Kenneth Grant, also a possibility, but I think Grant's probably more likely to go to the Chargers, given that we know that Jim Harbaugh absolutely loved him when he was at Michigan. Love to bring Grant in. So I think Grant is a real possibility here, especially given that Colston Loveland, his other former player, won't make it. And Will Johnson seems like he's going to fall. He's not really in need for the Chargers. We also know the Chargers love to attack both lines. So going Grant here would definitely do that. I love the idea of this pick here. I've been giving them a defensive tackle for a while. I think Grant is a great fit, even though he could potentially go earlier. Problem is he is a nose tackle, so some teams will just pass on him for that reason. I think he can offer a little bit of pressure, but it's a question of how much. At 23, first really off the board pick, Matthew Golden. I just can't work out where to fit him. I feel like he really should be going earlier than this. The bookmakers have him going somewhere in the top 17. I think that's unlikely, but I do still think he belongs somewhere in this range. I don't love the fit to the Packers, but you have to recognize that the Packers have tried a lot of first-round potential wide receivers. They tried out 4 or 5 and used T30s on them and went to their pro days. So I feel quite nervous about doing this, but I think it's probably this most logical location for Golden to fall to. I think they would much prefer to have McMillan. They need that big alpha type, but Golden does have plenty of speed. They do like speed. It's just, I feel like this is just giving them another play that's kind of similar to what they've actually already got. I think D-line's a possibility, but none of the good defensive tackles fell to this point. Cornerback, definitely possible as well. We saw Barron go, but not out of the question that Will Johnson would go here. Maybe Maxwell Hairston. I've mocked them cornerback in the past as well. At 24, I've got Nick Emenwari going to the Vikings, but I think it's more likely the Vikings trade down and trade out entirely. That would lead to them probably taking a cornerback early in the second round, because there's a whole heap of cornerbacks that won't make the first round, but belong somewhere in that early second round. I'm talking guys like Trey Amos, guys like Siobhan Ravel. People like that will definitely go early second round if they don't sneak into the first. And if they do, someone will fall out like a Will Johnson, who does seem to be falling like a stone at the moment. Emenwari, probably a first-round prospect, but the real question is where he goes. I like the idea of him going to the Vikings. I think if they stick, this is a pick that really makes a lot of sense. They've lost Cam Bynum. They've got Harrison Smith aging, but realistically, safeties rarely belong in the first round. I think Emenwari is an exception, though. He is an extremely good player. He and Starks are both true first-round candidates, although I prefer Emenwari off the two. Josh Connolly, this is definitely his floor. I think there's a good chance he goes early. We talked about 17 to the Bengals, but I've even heard him mocked as high as 9 by people that I tend to trust. We do know that the Texans probably go O-line. If they don't go Connolly here, maybe they go interior and go for someone like a Tyler Booker. I think Josh Simmons isn't out of the question here. Gray Zabel, if he falls, could certainly go here as well. plenty of options for O-line here. I think it makes the most sense for the Texans to go O-line at this stage. I was happy with giving them a D lineman, but they kind of needed a run stopper. I feel like they can get one of those later on. Also, Tony Pauline has talked about the possibility that of wide receiver with Emeka Egbuka apparently having a floor here. But I think if someone like Connolly falls, they're going to jump on that immediately. If he's not available, also don't be surprised if a Donovan Jackson gets involved at this point. 26, Will Johnson ends his fall for me, but he could certainly go further. Not impossible. This will be Max Hairston, for example, or any of those other cornerbacks I talked about. There are real possibilities here with the Rams, but I do feel like cornerback makes the most sense. I know that people have mocked them Shedeur Sanders. I don't think that makes any sense at all. I feel like you're just basically cutting off your nose for no particularly good reason. I feel like you're essentially just making it really hard to win now and also really annoying your quarterback by not giving him an actual weapon. So they need to try to win now, give Matthew Stafford something to help him, or alternatively help the defense get them winning at this point in time. Donovan Ezeruaku, I don't think he's really likely to go to the Ravens, but to me, he belongs earlier than this, and the Ravens do find value. D-line and edge is probably the position that makes the most sense for them, but I do think they probably ultimately go best player available. Could imagine them going O-line as the right players here. I think safety with the Starks for an Emanwari certainly makes sense. Probably more likely Starks for them. I think he would go nicely with Kyle Hamilton, allow him to push up. Not totally out of the question they would go linebacker either. There's plenty of options for them. It's very hard to know what they're going to do, which is why I so don't like mocking them. Lines, I've gone away for D-line for the first time. I still think that it makes most sense to go for someone opposite Aiden Hutchinson. If Ezeruaku's there, I think that makes sense. If Shamar Stewart somehow falls, I think he would be a fit here. I don't think they're likely to go for a James Pierce or a Mike Green because they really do care about personality a lot. But there are plenty of other options. Having said that, there is talk that because this is a deep edge class, that they're more likely to go O-line, which does get very weak as it gets deeper. If they do that, Tyler Booker is a guy that they reportedly love, according to Charlie Campbell, and I'm happy to go with that. So I've got Booker in this spot here. I don't think O-line was ever out of the question. If they're linked with Booker, I think that is a good link. And plus, pretty good bet with O-line being a plus bet option there as well. There has been talk about the Commanders going a wide receiver on day one, though I think it's probably more likely to happen on day two. Having said that, the odds are pretty good, plus 1,000, that I would probably put a little bit on it just in case. I do think Egbuka makes sense if he is available, or somehow if McMillan or Golden falls, I feel like that would snap them up in a heartbeat. Having said that, I think they're probably more likely to go for a D lineman. Having said that, they have been linked to both Booker, who at this stage is looking like he's less likely to be here, or also Maxwell Hairston. That doesn't really make sense to me going cornerback. They signed Lattimore. They've already got Sainristil they just got last year. Having said that, you move Sainristil to the slot, all of a sudden you've got an extra spot. But I don't know. I feel like they have greater needs to fix right now if they're going to try to win immediately. Even though cornerback was a real issue for them a season or two ago, I feel like they've kind of sorted that out. Staying ahead of it's not the worst idea, though. At 30, the Bills, very tough to mock the Bills. I feel like somewhere in defense is where they're going to go. I really wanted them to get a big run stuffer, but there's just no one that really makes sense in this range. I think this would be too early for Alfred Collins, even though I like the idea of him here. I feel like safety makes a lot of sense, so I've given them Malaki Starks. He's going to go somewhere in the first round, but he could be way early. It could be as high as 13 here. I think it's unlikely he falls out, and I think it's even unlikely he gets to this point. But they're going to go somewhere like that, or a Hairston, who I'm kind of regretting not including in the first round. It's unclear who the third cornerback is, and it felt like safer to have the guys that I'm confident are likely to be in the first round in here. Chiefs probably going to go O-line. In fact, I think they probably trade up. Josh Simmons might be available at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if they move up to 24 with the Vikings and go get Simmons or Connolly there, whichever one's available. I think that would make a lot of sense. I do think it's probably going to be O-line. It's not out of the question they go in another direction, but to me, it should be O-line. At 32, it is the Eagles. What are the Eagles likely to do? I think they're probably going to trade back for one of the many teams wanting to move in. In my last mock, I did it with Cleveland. This time I just mix it up. Did it with the Steelers. I think it's really difficult to work out what's going to happen here. This gives me two shots at Standers to the Steelers. I think they're more likely to get Steelers in the second, but it is possible they'll trade up and get him in the first. It really depends how much they like him. If they want D-line and Sanders, then they can probably do both doing this. The Eagles love to trade back and get picks. I feel like this is a possibility, but it could equally be the Giants moving up for Dart or for Sanders. Could be the Browns doing it as well. The Saints potentially, or potentially just sticking and picking with Dart. I feel like that's possible as well. If the Eagles don't move down, which they probably won't, I feel like edge makes sense here. James Pierce, Mike Green would both be a fit here. Not out of the question they go tight end with lots of questions about Dallas Goedert moving on. I've seen Mason Taylor mocked here. I don't think that really makes sense. I don't feel like he's a first round prospect. I don't think they're going to get anywhere near the other two guys. I feel like they probably do that in the later rounds with an Arroyo or a Taylor. But I do think that O-line's a real possibility here. They reportedly also love Starks, but I think there's a very low chance he makes it to them at this pick. And I also do like Mike Green, so he would be a good option if he falls to this point in time. And that's all we've got for my final mock draft of 2025. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below or hit us up on Instagram or Twitter. You can also check out the website at ffdfantasyfootball.com. It would be great if you could like and subscribe on YouTube. And I've also got some articles over at football.razzball.com. Coming up after the draft, I'll be bringing out a heap of rankings. We're talking dynasty, we're talking redraft, and a whole heap of rookie rankings as well. So make sure you stay subscribed. Make sure you keep getting those updates. Fantasy is really where I do most of my best work. I have been top 12 3 of the last 4 years in accuracy for mock drafts, but in fantasy, I've been top 11 each of the last 3 years, including third a couple of years ago as well. So happy to help you out with any fantasy or mock draft questions you have. And I look forward to seeing what's going to happen tomorrow as we have what is for me a little bit of a Christmas realistically. I love the NFL draft and I hope you guys love it too. I hope you've enjoyed everything that's happened during the preseason. I hope you'll hang around in for fantasy season. I look forward to seeing you guys then.